into Walden or Walden. It appeared to me that for a like reason men remain in their present low and primitive condition, but if they should feel the influence of the spring of springs arousing them, they would of necessity rise to a higher and more ethereal life. Henry David Thoreau's Walden. It was a warm October day when my classmates and I went out to Walden Pond. We were standing on the hill, looking over the pond, which was completely silent and empty, until it was awakened by rocks being thrown and skipped on top of it, and the loudness of 36 kids running around it and writing haiku, and even fishing with their bare hands until they touched the brisk water and had decided it was too cold to go any further. Then there was one kid who pulled out a towel, changed into his bathing suit, and simply said, "Who's coming with me?" A laugh came from the class as Matt Hart ran into the freezing pond and started to swim around. No one expected to jump into the pond. There was no way I was going to go in, until I was greeted by the wise words of my teacher, who simply said, "When you go home today, you can either tell your parents you went to Walden Pond, or that you went into Walden Pond." Then I thought about it. I thought about Thoreau himself, and I realized I wanted to be able to say I went into Walden Pond. With no plan, no bathing suit, and no towel, I ran in with my shorts and dove into the water, and was met by a freezing chill right when I came back up. At that moment it dawned on me that I was not going to be able to change until we got back. I did not have a towel to dry myself off with, and I was going to be cold for the next hour or so, and that was exactly the beauty of it. It did not matter what was going to happen next, as long as I was enjoying what was happening in that moment. And best of all, now I can say I went into Walden Pond. And it was at that moment that I realized I did not just dive into Walden Pond, but I also dove into Thoreau's classic book, Walden, and Thoreau's philosophies in life in the same jump. Every word he has written in this book means something to himself and his readers, and now to me. Every paragraph has a much bigger message, something in between those lines in the paper. It is a message that you have to live and find out yourself what it means to live a life more fully. It appeared to me that for a like reason men remain in their present and low primitive condition, but if they should feel the influence of the spring of springs arousing them, they would of necessity rise to a higher and more ethereal life. Henry Thoreau's Walden. I learned this exact lesson when I went into Walden Pond, because what I was doing there was in the moment. It did not matter what had happened before or after, as long as what was happening there was good. There are many things I've learned while reading Walden, things that I've never thought about before, and also things that I have a completely different opinion on than before. But while reading Thoreau, I always change my opinion on things and learn something new. There are even times where I'll stop reading and I start to imagine if Thoreau was still alive and in front of me, what I'll really say to him. It amazes me how one book can do that to you. Teach you so many lessons, remind you of the old, and even argue and disagree with the person that lived 150 years ago. And the whole time when this is happening, it completely relates to life on Earth today, just like it did 150 years ago. One thing I've admired while reading this book is Thoreau's willingness to put himself out there and do exactly what he wants to do. Not many people can say they have just thrown everything away and lived at Walden Pond for 2 years, but he can. And not many people could even say that they took a huge risk with their lives and went for what they believed in. Personally, I never want to become one of those people. I want to say I took the risk, like Thoreau did. Have you ever done something completely on a hunch, not knowing how it would turn out, or if it would completely collapse on itself, leaving you stranded? I will say, at my age, still going through middle and high school, I have not done anything like that yet. But for some, that is the way they like to live their lives, and Thoreau was one of those people. What he did, if it collapsed on itself, would literally leave him stranded. And depending on where he was at the time, either leaving him with no house, or simply just no life to fall back on. I wondered while reading this if it was just one day when he decided that he was going to go out and live in the woods for 2 years, or if it took him a while to actually do it. To me, he seems like the person that would just wake up one day, thinking of an idea like this one and go for it. I respect that quality in someone. It means they really believe in themselves and they do not need to rely so much on other people. Phil seems like one of those people, the way he handles himself and believes that what he's doing is the best for himself. I borrowed an axe and went down to the woods by Walden Pond, nearest to where I intended to build my house, and began to cut down some tall, airy white pines, still in their youth, for timber. Henry David Thoreau's Walden. While I read this, it seems like it was fairly easy for him to just go out into the woods where he wanted to be and just start doing what he wanted to be doing. It definitely took some persistence, some heart, and a whole lot of time, but he got it done. In the end, it cost him just more than $28 to build this house, a house that he would live in for 2 years for just $28. If you're asking me, $14 a year for shelter is a pretty damn good deal. To some, they may think it might not be, simply because he is living in the woods by himself. But that is not he nor I see it. It was just enough for him. He didn't need any more than he had. He was comfortable enough there and then to write one of the greatest pieces of literature ever, the book I'm reflecting on right now, all for $28. That's something I can knock it over. Sometimes, as I said before, while I will read something and just stop and start to think about what I just read. Yet men have come to such a pass that they frequently starve, not for want of necessaries, but for want of luxuries. Henry David Thoreau's Walden. The excerpts and statement like this one are the ones that frequently brought me to do so. It makes me think about the amount of times where I would want to get something so badly, and right when I reach the amount of money to get it, then I'll get it without hesitation. Then I soon started thinking to myself, was it worth it? And soon enough I want something else, and the chain goes on, and no one else can stop it but myself. People will always want something new, and that is acceptable. It's working to get that want, and not working for what you need first. When it comes down to it, if you simply just work for what you need, then you will never find life is so much easier than constantly starving yourself for your wants, and never be able to have enough, always just barely surviving, but you will never stop being hungry. Is that what you really want? Do you really want to never have enough, or can you just choose to be happy with what you have? What you need to do will not need to get a new suit to do it in. For him, the old will do. Henry David Thoreau's Walden. We don't always need that new suit, as long as the old one still works, and that is all you truly need. When I finally look back on the first chapter, Economy, Walden, there are many different things and lessons and stories that I will remember. Like how Thoreau does not believe in charity, but at the same time he does. And how you never need a new shirt to do work in if one shirt is working fine for you. And also to spend your money on the important things in life. And you will soon realize that to strive for that, you really don't need to work much, especially in Thoreau's case. These are all different lessons, but there is one factor that will always amaze me about this book. If you heard this list of lessons this book has taught me, and thought about how they connect to your life, you would soon realize that they truly do. Then if I ask you what year this book was written, you may answer 10 or 20 years ago, simply because it is still all so relevant to the life we live in today. But the amazing thing is that this book was written around 150 years ago, a completely different time with people and different lifestyles. Everything back then was truly different, yet what he wrote this about is still so relevant to everything today. It really makes you think, did Thoreau somehow know what life was going to be like in 150 years, or was it just pure coincidence? He probably did not know what's going to be happening now, but no matter how much the world has changed, the values that are so important to all of us are still and will always be the same.